Let's talk about more of it with American Petroleum Institute CEO Michael Sommers and Lippow Oil Associates President Andy Lippow. Mike, I'm going to start with you. You represent the industry. It's a weird spot to be in because there are different relationships with Canada and its oil. What is your message or the message of the American oil industry right now?
Well, let's put this into perspective. The United States produces about 13.4 million barrels of oil a day, but we consume about 20 million barrels of oil every single day. So we do depend on exports into the United States, particularly from Canada. You mentioned it, PADD 2 into the Midwest, about 75% of the oil refined in the Midwest is from Canada. And so we've worked very hard with the Trump administration so that they understand how important those exports into the United States are. And we thank them for that recognition, lowering the tariff from the potential 25% to 10%. But we're going to continue to work with them and hopefully carve out more exclusions for the oil and gas industry.
So you think that, back to you very quickly, that the reduction from 25% to 10% was partly the work of you, API, and maybe the American oil industry to convince the White House, hey, go after tariffs if you want, but this is something that we actually use more of than they do.
Well, one of the most important components of this is that American refiners buy that oil from Canada at a discount. In most cases, it's about a 20% discount. So if you were to put a 25% tariff on that Canadian oil, you're basically eliminating the incentive for us to process that oil in American refineries. So it was very important to us that we carved out this exclusion for American oil and gas, and we're going to continue to work with them to get it down to zero.
Andy, what should consumers expect? Are we going to see prices at the pump go up?
Well, of course, it depends on where you live. Now, if you're in Maine down to Boston, you should be ready to see a 20-cent per gallon increase in gasoline prices as Irving Oil, the major refiner and supplier in that region, is already notified their customers that they're passing through every bit of the tariff to them. If you're in a place like the Rockies, and especially a state like Montana, where those 4 refineries do depend on Canadian production, you could see Canadian producers try to divert some of that oil to the Pacific markets as there's still pipeline space available. And if you were to run short of crude oil, especially in a state like Montana, you could see prices increase there.
20-cent increase, Andy, it's kind of a big deal, although someone said that prices were higher just as recently as this summer. Is that right? Where does that take us back to?
Well, it does take us back to the summertime, and right now we are trading winter-grade gasoline, so in a couple of months we're going to see gasoline prices increase another 20 cents a gallon just from the switch between the winter and the summer.
So basically we could see gasoline prices 40 cents higher by the summer of this coming year, or no? Is that putting it too sharply?
No, I think that's exactly right, especially if the tariffs stay in place. And while we haven't talked much about tariffs on Mexico, which had been at the 25% level, the United States is still importing about 500,000 barrels a day of crude oil from them and a couple of 100,000 barrels a day more of refined products. And that's where it starts affecting refining on the Gulf Coast and the East Coast.
What would be the message, Mike? A lot of our Canadian friends might be watching this right now. You represent the U.S. oil and gas industry. What would be our message as Americans to our good friends? Many of them are watching or listening right now, north of the border.
Well, Canada continues to be a major trading partner to the United States, and we want to continue to import that kind of oil into the United States because the truth is that these refineries in the Midwest and in other parts of the United States can't refine the oil that is actually produced here in the United States. It is that heavier, sour oil that we find that we need to continue to import to keep prices low for American consumers. So we want to keep working with them on this. We're working with the Trump administration. Again, we appreciate the important recognition that they put forward to reduce that tariff from 25 to 10. But long term, we need to be able to produce and process the kind of oil that we find here, WTI, here in the United States. But the way we do that is we have to get permitting reform done through the United States Congress so we can actually build something here. We haven't built a large-scale refinery here in America since 1977, which is one of the reasons why we're dealing right now with the situation where we are still processing this heavier crude that we get from Canada.
Yeah, hard to believe the last refinery built in America was when I was 6 and Kelly was just a thought.
Wow.
Here's a wall graphic that we have, and there's a lot going on in this graphic. And that's the point, okay? And what this graphic's going to show, and if you're on the radio, it's basically a blue line, which is Canadian oil imports soaring over the last 20 years, and a mishmash, a spaghetti of a bunch of other stuff, Nigeria, Venezuela, Saudi Arabia, Iraq, all kind of remaining steady or going down. The idea, Mike, that we need to import about 6 to 8 million barrels, and Andy, chime in as well. Mike, we need to import that many millions of barrels of oil a day, because it's not just where or what kind of oil it is, correct? It's where it goes. If you're shipping something to Houston, that's very, very different than needing the oil in St. Louis Park, Minnesota. Is it not? And getting there is actually less environmental and more dangerous if it has to go by, say, barge than maybe rail or pipeline.
Well, that's exactly right. And this interdependent relationship that we have with Canada continues to be very important. And we want to continue to work with Canada on bringing that oil into the United States. But remember, there's not a lot of other places where that oil has to go. So we want to continue that important relationship and continue to work with Canada, not just on oil, by the way, but on natural gas as well, which was also subject to only a 10% tariff rather than a 25% tariff. We need that natural gas also, particularly for the Northeast and the Pacific Northwest.
We're going to leave it there, but Mike and Andy, invaluable insight. We'd go the whole hour, but then I'd be fired and we'd never do it again. So Andy and Mike, really appreciate both of your times. Thank you very much.